well, and to encourage a debate around it. Yeah.
So that kind of leads into my next question. I was just thinking that just in considering all these very controversial issues that surround her story, you very much chose to deal with a very small aspect of it. You chose to just deal with her, and I'm just wondering why it was, in making these two pieces, why it was just specifically her that you kind of.
Yes, well, I suppose there are many controversial ethical issues surrounding kind of what was done with her cells, and but I wanted to focus, as I say, on Henrietta the person, because I think in a crisis situation, when somebody develops cancer, it's suddenly, it's the hospital, it's the chemotherapy, it's the the drugs, it's all the disease, and the person becomes defined by cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted this to focus on Henrietta, to show that there is a person behind the cancer, I suppose, and that that can sometimes be forgotten, particularly in the hospital setting. And I suppose we all know, and we've all been touched by cancer at some stage, and some people are going through very, very difficult times. But just to focus on the person behind it, I think I wanted to create awareness around that, So I think the video piece captures that quite well, and at the same time demonstrating cell replication too, So.
Okay. And then I was going to just talk about the kind of space, and personally I think that you've dealt with the topic of cancer in a very dignified and unsensational manner, and I also think that the way you've dealt with it really allows the viewer to engage with the topic if they want to, but they're not like bombarded with all this aggressive. I don't think it's an aggressive piece, or any piece, certainly, considering that it deals with cancer, which is such a hard-hitting subject. So kind of with regards to this alternative space, deAppendix, which is also a GP surgery, how important is the location to your work, and do you feel the location needs a kind of an extra stimulating dynamic that certainly wouldn't be found in a kind of a traditional gallery setting? And as you kind of mentioned, your work is going to reach a much broader range of people as it's in a GP surgery. And did the setting and the audience kind of affect how the work developed, knowing the people that were going to be coming in, and how it might affect them in a good or a bad way?
Yeah, I suppose it did. You have to be aware of your audience, particularly in a situation like this. And in this case, as I said, it's the patients attending the surgery mostly. As apart from tonight, it will be open just surgery hours. I've worked a lot with patients in a hospital setting, which is different, but this is the first time that I've kind of worked in a community setting, that was in a GP surgery. So I suppose it's important to me that if it facilitates a greater access for patients to the arts and enhancing the environment and that, it's important that it also kind of encourages a dialogue around the topic. So there were a couple of, and also the dialogue between patients, families and GP about cancer, because as you say, it is a very hard-hitting subject. And I think a space like this is a wonderful place for bridging that gap also between art, medicine and science, and I think it's a wonderful hybrid space, and just creates a great discourse between arts and health, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I just kind of wanted to ask you about the title of the show, Henrietta's Dance, and I was going to ask you about this quote by Walter Nelson Rees. I think that's where you got the title of it.
Yeah.
And maybe ask you about other people who have chosen to take on Henrietta's story and explore it for themselves, and how their kind of research is different from yours, or
okay. Walter Nelson Rees was a cell biologist, an American cell biologist who worked specifically in cell lines, and he was one that discovered all those years ago, 22 years after she died, that HeLa cells had contaminated every other cell line in the world. So he devoted a lot of his career to trying to contain, I suppose, the spread of HeLa. But in that documentary about it, where he speaks of them as they're still out there, they're dancing her cells. So it was kind of that quote that I kind of got the title of the show from, and I think it was important as well to put that in. But I'd also like to mention the author Rebecca Skloot, the American author who wrote the book The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. It's a fantastic book if anybody gets the chance to read it, and it goes much more in depth into the family and what happened to the family, and you meet the children and that sort of thing in it as
Because
well.
I think at one point one of her daughters, when she heard, because she didn't know anything about the cells, that she thought that someday she might be walking down the street and see her mother, see like all these clones of her mother.
They didn't understand, what, like their mother was dead 22 years and suddenly they're told that she's still alive somewhere else, their cells of her still alive, and they thought that, they'd meet clones of her somewhere, so it was, it's really opened your eyes to or my eyes anyway, to scientific and medical and pharmaceutical industries and that operate behind the scenes of the ethical issues.